I downloaded Tinder on a whim after a breakup that left me feeling more than a little lost. Swiping through profiles became a late night ritual, a way to distract myself from the emptiness of my apartment and the echoes of a relationship that had fizzled out. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a casual fling or some entertaining conversations. What I didn't anticipate was the dark path that my casual swiping would lead me down. One evening, while mindlessly scrolling, I stumbled across a profile that caught my eye. His name was Jake, and his pictures showcased a charming smile and an adventurous spirit. He was into hiking, photography, and seemed to have that effortlessly cool vibe that I found magnetic. After a few exchanges, he suggested we meet up at a local coffee shop. Feeling a mix of excitement and nerves, I agreed, thinking it might be nice to connect with someone new. The day of our date arrived, and I felt a strange blend of anticipation and anxiety. I arrived at the coffee shop, scanning the room for a familiar face. Jake walked in a few minutes later, and my heart did a little flip. He was even more attractive in person, his energy drawing me in. We chatted about everything: our favorite movies, travel destinations, and shared interests. I felt the connection, and for the first time in months, I was genuinely enjoying myself. As the date progressed, Jake's conversation took a darker turn. He casually mentioned his fascination with true crime documentaries and how he enjoyed exploring abandoned places. At first, I thought it was just an edgy conversation starter, something to keep the mood interesting. But as the minutes passed, I noticed a strange intensity in his eyes when he spoke about it. His passion for these subjects felt a little too intense, almost unnerving. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just a quirky aspect of his personality. After a few hours, we decided to head out for a walk. He suggested a nearby park, and I agreed, thinking it would be a nice way to wind down the evening. As we strolled through the dimly lit paths, he pointed out various trees and bushes, explaining their significance in local folklore. It was all harmless enough until he began telling me about a game he played with friends, where they would explore haunted places at night. The way he described it sent chills down my spine. It felt like he was less interested in the thrill of the unknown and more in the darkness that surrounded it. At one point, he suggested we check out an old, abandoned house that was supposedly haunted. My gut twisted at the suggestion, but I didn't want to seem rude or boring, so I laughed it off, saying maybe another time. He seemed undeterred, his eyes sparkling with a wild excitement. As the night wore on, I realized I was feeling increasingly uncomfortable. The initial charm that had drawn me to Jake felt overshadowed by something sinister. He was no longer just a cute guy with a quirky personality. He was becoming a stranger, a person who thrived on the morbid and unsettling. I excused myself to go to the restroom, hoping to recalibrate my thoughts. Standing in front of the mirror, I splashed some water on my face, trying to shake off the feeling of dread creeping up on me. When I returned to the table, Jake was scrolling through his phone. He glanced up and smiled, but his expression felt off, almost predatory. He showed me a photo he had taken earlier in the evening, a dark silhouette of the park's trees, the moonlight casting eerie shadows. I couldn't help but feel like he was trying to draw me into his world, one that was more twisted than I had initially thought. As the night came to a close, I suggested calling it a night. He seemed disappointed but agreed. On the way back to my car, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was ready to put this strange encounter behind me. Just as I was about to get into my car, Jake leaned in, his voice low and conspiratorial. He mentioned he had a secret spot nearby that he thought I might find interesting. The way he said it sent alarm bells ringing in my head. I politely declined, feeling the need to put distance between us. Jake stepped back, his expression darkening. He watched me for a moment, and I could feel the tension hanging in the air. I hurriedly got into my car, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that lingered. As I drove away, I glanced in my rear-view mirror, half expecting to see him following me. To my relief, he was still standing by the curb, his figure growing smaller as I turned the corner. For the next few days, I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. I didn't block Jake or unmatch him. mostly because I was curious about what he would say next. But as the hours turned into days, I received no messages from him. It was strange, but I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Maybe he sensed my discomfort and decided to back off. A week later, I got a notification from Tinder. It was a message from Jake. My heart raced when I opened it. He sent a photo of the abandoned house he had mentioned, but it wasn't just a picture. It was a series of images showcasing the inside, dark and foreboding, with reports of strange sounds and sightings from those who dared to explore. The caption read, "Next time, let's explore this together." Suddenly, I felt a cold chill wash over me. I had no idea how he got those pictures or why he was still obsessed with this idea. I unmatched him immediately, my heart pounding. It was a gut instinct, a need to sever any connection with him. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I checked the locks on my doors, drew the curtains tight, and tried to distract myself with mindless TV shows. Days turned into weeks, and although I tried to forget about the strange encounter, I couldn't help but feel paranoid. Every time I heard a noise outside, I jumped. The thought of Jake lurking in the shadows haunted me. I started to notice things around my apartment that felt off. Items I was sure I had left in one place would appear in another. It was small, insignificant things, but they gnawed at my peace of mind. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled across a news article that made my blood run cold. A local couple had gone missing after venturing into an abandoned house rumored to be haunted. The article detailed their last known whereabouts, and my stomach dropped as I recognized the address. It was the same house Jake had shown me. It was like a punch to the gut, the realization that I had brushed off something so sinister. The article mentioned that the police were investigating the area, but there were no leads. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows taunting me. I felt trapped in a nightmare that refused to end. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The thought sent shivers down my spine. Months later, I still find myself glancing over my shoulder, always on edge. I deleted Tinder and vowed to never look back. The world of dating felt tainted, the excitement replaced with fear. I couldn't help but wonder about Jake, where he had gone, and what he was capable of. The darkness of that night still clings to me, a reminder that sometimes swiping right can lead you to far more than just a bad date. I was scrolling through Tinder one evening, just mindlessly swiping left and right, looking for some distractions after a long week. It was the usual parade of smiles and selfies, but then something caught my eye. There she was, a girl named Jenna with big green eyes and a smile that seemed genuine. The bio was simple, but intriguing, looking for adventure and new experiences. I matched with her almost immediately, and it felt like the kind of serendipitous moment you hear about in cheesy movies. After a few exchanges of mundane banter about our favorite shows and music, Jenna suggested we meet up. I hesitated for a moment, but the thrill of meeting someone new pushed me to agree. We decided to meet at a small coffee shop that was known for its cozy vibe. I arrived early, nerves bubbling in my stomach. When Jenna walked in, she was even more stunning in person. We chatted over lattes, and it felt easy, like we'd known each other for ages. The conversation flowed, and I found myself laughing more than I had in a while. As the evening wore on, the conversation shifted to deeper topics. She shared stories about her childhood and how she moved around a lot, while I talked about my family and my struggles to settle down in one place. There was something intoxicating about her energy, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, I noticed a change. Jenna's demeanor subtly shifted. Her smiles lingered a bit too long, and her eyes sparkled with an intensity that made me feel a little uneasy. I brushed it off, attributing it to the ambience of the dimly lit cafe. After our coffee date, she suggested we take a stroll around the nearby park. The air was cool, and the trees cast eerie shadows that danced in the fading light. As we walked, she pulled out her phone and snapped a few pictures of us, asking if I minded. It seemed innocent at first, but there was a strange edge to her enthusiasm. I chuckled, thinking it was just her way of making memories, but inside, a voice whispered to be cautious. The night deepened and the park grew quieter. We ventured further along a path that seemed to lead into the dark heart of the woods. The streetlights faded, and the only light came from her phone's screen as she kept snapping photos. I began to feel a bit trapped, the shadows closing in around us. I tried to steer the conversation back to safer topics, sharing anecdotes about my college days, but Jenna seemed distracted. Her eyes roamed the darkness, and I could sense something was off. Without warning, she stopped and stared into the trees, her finger poised over her phone. I followed her gaze but saw nothing. She turned to me, eyes wide with excitement, and asked if I believed in ghosts. I laughed it off, thinking she was just trying to lighten the mood. But her expression didn't shift, she was dead serious. Jenna launched into a story about how this park was rumored to be haunted, recounting tales of people who had gone missing. The way she spoke felt almost too animated, like she was trying to draw me into a narrative that was unsettling. Feeling the need to lighten the tension, I suggested we head back, but she tugged my arm gently, urging me to stay just a little longer. Against my better judgment, I relented. We walked on, and she began to reveal more about herself. The stories became darker, tales of her past relationships that ended violently, people she had known who had vanished without a trace. I tried to be sympathetic, but an unmistakable chill ran down my spine. There was something about her eyes, a flicker of something dark lurking beneath the surface. Suddenly, she stopped again, this time her expression shifting from excitement to something more sinister. She pulled out her phone, and I could see her hands trembling slightly as she scrolled through her camera roll. When she turned the screen toward me, my stomach dropped. There were dozens of photos, all taken in the same park, but they were different. They were blurry, eerie images of people walking away, faces obscured, and in the background, shadows that looked all too human. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach, panic rising as she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. She spoke of how she loved capturing moments that others couldn't see, how she felt a connection to the spirits of the park. I tried to laugh it off, but the unease grew heavier. I suggested we head back again, my body instinctively shifting toward a path we had come from, but she wouldn't budge. Instead, she stepped closer, invading my personal space, her breath warm against my face. I could smell the coffee on her breath, mixed with a hint of something metallic. It sent alarm bells ringing in my head. I thought about making an excuse about how I needed to get home, but then she leaned in closer and whispered about how she could help me find what I was truly looking for. It sounded like a threat wrapped in a promise, and I felt the blood drain from my face. In a moment of sheer panic, I took a step back, trying to put some distance between us. She frowned, the playful glint fading from her eyes, replaced by something more predatory. I turned and began to walk away quickly, glancing back only to see her staring at me, her expression a mix of disappointment and fury. As I hurried down the path, I heard her footsteps behind me, and despite the adrenaline pumping through my veins, I refused to look back. The world around me felt unreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My heart raced as I broke into a jog, then a full sprint, not stopping until I reached the safety of the streetlights. I ducked into a nearby bar, panting heavily as I tried to calm my racing heart. I glanced out the window, half expecting to see her lurking in the shadows, but there was nothing, just the bustling life of the city, oblivious to what had just unfolded. I opened my phone to block her on Tinder, but before I could, a notification popped up. A message from Jenna. "You were so close to understanding. Don't you want to know?" In that moment, I realized I had escaped something sinister, something that went beyond just a bad date. I didn't respond. I deleted my account that very night, swiping left on the idea of ever meeting someone through an app again. The thrill of dating had turned into a horror story I never wanted to relive. The darkness of the park would linger in my mind long after that night, a haunting reminder that not everyone you meet is looking for love. Some are just looking for something else entirely. Scrolling through Tinder late one night, I found myself in a familiar routine, swiping left on the usual suspects and right on the occasional cute face. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just some casual conversation, maybe a date. That's how I stumbled across Alex's profile. His bio was short and sweet, filled with a mix of humor and a hint of mystery. He had this charming smile that made you want to know more, like he had secrets to share. We matched almost instantly, and within minutes we were chatting away. He seemed normal enough, talking about his favorite movies and his love for hiking. At first, it felt like any other typical Tinder conversation. We exchanged selfies, and I couldn't help but notice how attractive he was in person. There was this energy about him that was hard to ignore. He suggested meeting up for coffee, and I was thrilled. We agreed on a small cafe a few blocks from my apartment, a place I frequented. The anticipation was real. I was excited to see if the chemistry translated into the real world. The day of our date arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I dressed casually but cute, hoping to impress without trying too hard. Walking into the cafe, I spotted him right away. He was sitting at a corner table, sipping on something and scrolling through his phone. As I approached, he looked up and flashed that same charming smile from his profile. The first few moments were filled with easy conversation, laughter, and the usual getting-to-know-you banter. Everything seemed perfect. However, as the conversation deepened, I started to pick up on small, odd things. He asked some strange questions, like how I felt about the darkness or if I believed in fate. I brushed it off as quirky small talk, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made me feel uneasy. Still, I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. After all, everyone has their eccentricities. The date ended after a couple of hours, and I decided to give him a chance. He walked me home, and we exchanged a quick hug before I headed inside. As I locked the door behind me, I felt a rush of relief. I wanted to like him, but something about the whole interaction left me feeling off-kilter. The next day, he texted me, asking if I wanted to hang out again. Against my better judgment, I said yes, hoping that maybe the weirdness was just first date jitters. Our second date was at a park, which was a bit more relaxed. We walked around, and the conversation flowed a little easier. But the strange questions returned. He kept asking about my childhood, my fears, and even how I would handle confrontations. It was odd, but at that point I was chalking it up to him just wanting to know me better. Things took a turn when he suggested we go hiking the following weekend. I loved hiking, so I was immediately on board. We planned a trip to a popular trail about an hour outside the city. When Saturday rolled around, I was excited. The sun was shining and the weather was perfect. As we drove out to the trailhead, I felt a sense of adventure. The hike started off great. We chatted about random things and the scenery was breathtaking. But as we ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere shifted. The trail became less populated, and I noticed how quiet it was. Alex seemed to change too. He became more serious, and his questions turned darker. He asked me what I thought about death, and how I would feel if someone close to me disappeared. I tried to laugh it off, but it was getting increasingly uncomfortable. I was starting to feel trapped, like he was leading me into a conversation I wasn't ready to have. When we finally reached a secluded overlook, I felt an overwhelming urge to leave. The view was stunning, but the tension in the air was palpable. As we sat there, he began to share a story about a friend of his who had gone missing while hiking. The way he described it sent chills down my spine. He spoke with such intensity, as if he was reliving the moment. I stared at him, trying to process the shift from playful banter to this ominous tale. In my gut, I felt something was off. After a few minutes of silence, I suggested we head back. Alex didn't move right away. Instead, he just stared out at the horizon. I could feel the anxiety bubbling up inside me. As we started back down the trail, I noticed he kept glancing over his shoulder. It was unsettling. Halfway down, I decided to speed up a bit, needing to create some distance. I could hear him behind me, but it felt like he was lingering. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and I was desperate to get back to the car. The woods felt suffocating, and I could hear the rustling of leaves that seemed to echo louder than before. When I finally reached the car, I jumped in and locked the doors, my heart racing. Alex arrived shortly after, out of breath, but wearing that same smile that had initially drawn me in. I wanted to scream as he climbed into the passenger seat. We drove back in silence, the air heavy with unspoken words. I could feel a sense of dread creeping in, and I was desperate to escape. Once we got back to the city, I dropped him off at his place, a forced smile plastered on my face. I told him I had a great time, but inside I was screaming to be free. The moment I got home, I blocked him on everything. I didn't want to think about it anymore, but the image of his intense gaze haunted me. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to forget about the whole experience. But then I received a notification that made my blood run cold. There he was, on a news article about a series of disappearances in the area where we hiked. My heart raced as I read the details. Witnesses reported seeing a man matching Alex's description near the last known locations of some of the missing people. Suddenly, all those strange questions and dark conversations made sense. He wasn't just quirky, he was dangerous. I felt sick thinking about how close I had come to being another name on that list. It took me a long time to shake off the unease of that experience. I deleted Tinder for good, realizing that sometimes things are better left unexplored. Swiping through Tinder on a lazy Sunday evening felt like a casual pastime, like scrolling through Netflix for something to binge. I was in that weird phase where I was single, but not really looking for anything serious, Just a little attention, some casual chats, and maybe a date or two. I matched with a guy named Derek, who had this killer smile and a bio that read like a laid-back surfer. He seemed chill, the kind of guy who'd order a beer and talk about nothing and everything at once. The initial banter was light and fun, filled with emojis and memes that made me snort laugh. Derek was charming, and his texts had a way of wrapping around my brain like a warm blanket. He made jokes about his love for tacos and how he once tried to impress a girl by cooking her dinner, but ended up burning the pasta. I found that endearing. The conversation flowed easily, and I felt like I could be myself, which is rare in a world of online dating where everyone's trying to put their best foot forward. After a few days of texting, he asked if I wanted to meet up. At first, I hesitated. I'd heard enough horror stories about first dates going wrong, and I wasn't looking to add another notch to that belt. But something about Derek made me feel safe. Maybe it was his goofy humor or the way he seemed genuinely interested in my life. I agreed to meet him at a local coffee shop, a cozy little place with mismatched furniture and an array of pastries that could tempt anyone into a sugar coma. The day of the date arrived and the nerves kicked in. I spent way too long picking an outfit, trying to strike that perfect balance between casual and cute. When I finally walked into the coffee shop, my heart raced a little. Derek was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, looking just as cute in person as he did in his pictures. We chatted over lattes and everything felt right. The conversation flowed, and I found myself laughing more than I had in ages as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Casting that golden glow through the windows, I felt a sense of ease wash over me. Derek suggested we take a walk, and I agreed, feeling adventurous. We strolled through the nearby park, talking about everything from our favorite movies to our worst childhood memories. It was refreshing, and I began to let my guard down. But then the vibe shifted. It was subtle at first, like the air thickening before a storm. Something in Derek's eyes changed, and the laughter faded. He started talking about his ex-girlfriend, how she cheated on him, and how he had to teach her a lesson. At first, I thought he was joking, but the intensity in his voice told me otherwise. My stomach twisted into knots, and I tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics. As we walked deeper into the park, the path became less crowded. The laughter of other park-goers faded into the background, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. Derek began to share more about his past, little snippets that made me uneasy. He mentioned how he used to track people online and how easy it was to find someone's information if you really wanted to. I laughed nervously, thinking he was just trying to impress me, but the more he talked, the more his words sunk in. By the time we reached a secluded area of the park, I was ready to make an excuse to leave. He had grown increasingly intense, his gaze fixated on me with an intensity that felt unsettling. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up as he leaned in closer, talking about how trust was hard to find in relationships. I thought about that little voice in my head, the one that tells you when something's not right. It was screaming at me now. I managed to excuse myself, saying I needed to get home. Derek seemed taken aback, but he quickly masked it with a smile. He walked me back to my car, and I tried to keep the conversation light, but the atmosphere had shifted. The sweetness I'd felt earlier was gone, replaced by an underlying tension that made my skin crawl. As I got into my car, I felt a rush of relief wash over me. I turned the ignition and was about to pull away when I noticed Derek standing by the passenger side, still smiling, but his eyes told a different story. There was something predatory in his gaze. I waved goodbye and drove off, trying to shake off the unease. The next couple of days were filled with a mix of confusion and dread. I kept replaying the date in my head, trying to rationalize everything. Maybe I was overreacting, but deep down I knew I wasn't. It was like my intuition was screaming at me to be cautious. Then came the messages. At first, they were harmless, just checking in to see how I was. I felt guilty for leaving him hanging, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As days passed, the messages became more frequent and aggressive. He'd send me memes, then follow up with "Why are you ignoring me?" or "I thought we had a connection." It felt suffocating, like a noose tightening around my neck. I tried to block him, but he found a way around it. He created another account, this time with a different name and picture. I recognized the writing style immediately. It was like he was stalking me, and the realization sent chills down my spine. I felt trapped in a web I couldn't escape. One night, I was home alone, binge-watching a show to distract myself when I heard a noise outside. My heart dropped as I grabbed my phone, half expecting a notification from Derek. I peered out the window, and my stomach dropped. There he was, standing outside my house, his face illuminated by the streetlight. Fear clawed at me as I ducked away from the window, heart racing, breath hitching in my throat. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call the police. He hadn't done anything yet. But I knew that this wasn't just some harmless obsession. It was a nightmare unfolding right in front of me. I spent the entire night locked in my room, jumping at every sound, wondering if he'd come back. I didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, I decided to take action. I contacted the police and reported everything. They took my statement seriously, but there was only so much they could do without concrete evidence. Eventually, I moved. I packed up my life and relocated to a different city, hoping to escape the shadow of Derek. It was a drastic move, but I needed to reclaim my peace of mind. I deleted all my dating apps and swore off online dating altogether. Looking back, that night in the park felt like a warning sign I had ignored. The charm and humor had masked the darkness lurking beneath. I learned that not every swipe leads to a fairy tale ending. Sometimes it leads to a nightmare. Swiping through Tinder is usually a mindless activity, a way to kill time between classes or while waiting for my coffee. Most profiles are a mix of cute selfies, goofy captions, and the occasional motivational quote. It wasn't until I matched with this guy named Evan that I realized how quickly things could take a turn from ordinary to horrifying. Evan wasn't your typical Tinder match. Sure, he had the usual shirtless gym selfies, but there was something off about him. His bio was vague, just a few cryptic lines about embracing the unknown and finding beauty in darkness. At first, I thought it was just his attempt at being mysterious, the kind of guy who tries too hard to be intriguing. My curiosity got the better of me, and I swiped right. Our conversation started off innocently enough. He asked about my favorite horror movies, which I took as a good sign. I love a good scare, and we quickly bonded over our mutual appreciation for films like Hereditary and The Conjuring. As we chatted, I found myself drawn in by his unconventional views and dark sense of humor. There was something magnetic about him, like a moth to a flame, and I felt the thrill of excitement and danger intertwining. After a week of texting back and forth, he suggested we meet up. He proposed a late-night walk at a nearby park, claiming it was serene and perfect for deep conversations. I hesitated at first. Meeting someone from a dating app in the dark isn't exactly the safest idea, but the allure of his mystery was hard to resist. I agreed, telling myself I could just leave if things got weird. The night of our meeting, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread as I drove to the park. It was one of those chilly autumn nights when the leaves crunched underfoot, the air filled with that sweet smell of decay. As I parked, I noticed the park was eerily empty. A few distant streetlights flickered, but most of the paths were shrouded in darkness. My heart raced as I got out of the car, the sound of gravel crunching beneath my feet echoing in the stillness. I spotted Evan leaning against a tree, looking out into the dark. He wore a black hoodie that seemed to swallow him whole, casting his features in shadow. When he turned to face me, a chill ran down my spine. His smile was wide, almost too wide, like he was trying to suppress something lurking beneath the surface. As we walked, we talked about everything from our childhood fears to our thoughts on the afterlife. The deeper we got into conversation, the more I felt that something wasn't quite right. He spoke about death with an unsettling calmness, describing it as a beautiful release. I tried to laugh it off, thinking he was just trying to be edgy, but it made me uncomfortable. The park was quiet, the only sound being our footsteps and the rustle of leaves. At one point, he stopped abruptly and pointed to a small, dilapidated building at the edge of the park. "You know what that is?" he asked, his eyes gleaming with excitement. I shook my head, my stomach churning a little. "It's an old asylum. They say it's haunted." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Exploring abandoned buildings was a whole other level of crazy, one I wasn't interested in. But Evan had this intense energy, and before I knew it, I was following him towards the building. The closer we got, the more the air felt thick and heavy. It was like stepping into another world, a place where time stood still. Once inside, the darkness enveloped us. I fumbled for my phone, using the flashlight to pierce through the shadows. The walls were covered in graffiti, remnants of a time when kids dared each other to step inside. The air smelled stale, a mixture of mold and something else I couldn't quite place. Evan seemed to thrive in the gloom, darting ahead and beckoning me to follow. I felt like I was in a horror film, the kind where the naive protagonist makes all the wrong choices. But I couldn't back out now. I was too far gone. As we moved deeper into the building, I noticed strange symbols etched into the walls, like some dark ritual had taken place. It was unsettling, and I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. He led me to a room at the back, and when I stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt electric, charged with something sinister. Evan's demeanor changed, his playful attitude replaced with a chilling seriousness. He began talking about the power of fear, how it can be harnessed and transformed. My heart raced as I realized he wasn't just some quirky guy who liked horror movies. He was obsessed, perhaps dangerously so. Suddenly he moved closer, and I instinctively took a step back, my gut screaming that I needed to leave. He reached out, grabbing my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. The way he looked at me felt predatory, as if he was savoring my fear. Panic surged through me, and I could feel the adrenaline kicking in. I yanked my arm away, half expecting him to laugh it off, but the look in his eyes told me this wasn't a joke. I turned to run, scrambling through the darkened halls. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound echoing in my ears as I dashed toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear him laughing, a low, haunting sound that sent ice through my veins. I burst through the door and into the fresh air, gasping for breath as I sprinted toward my car. Once inside, I locked the doors and started the engine, my hands shaking as I glanced in the rearview mirror. I half expected to see him standing there, but the darkness swallowed the park whole. I drove away, the adrenaline still coursing through me, the image of his twisted smile burned into my mind. Looking back, it feels surreal, like a nightmare that I can't shake off. Evan was a reminder that sometimes the darkness you seek can consume you in ways you never expect. Swiping through Tinder might seem harmless, but that night showed me just how quickly things can spiral into something truly disturbing.